A boy was walking his bumblebee. He tied it to a string. The sky was lit up with violet light. A bird began to sing a song of sixpence.
Hello! Hello, everybody! We are recording. This is the Pages Podcast.
Pages Podcast!
I'm Blue Caldwell.
I am Kate Citron.
That is Guinevere back there. You can see her tail.
My arm tail.
And Basil is around here somewhere. He'll probably be coming through in the background at some point.
Our co-hosts are kind of rude. This week, we read Bobcat by Rebecca Lee.
Bobcat and Other Stories.
Oh, yes.
Which was a short story collection. It's Kate's World Book Night book that she'll be giving out for free.
In just a couple of weeks, we all get to pick up our books from our designated locations.
Mm-hmm. I have Weird Sisters, which I have read before, and I'm also listening to again on Audible.
Oh, you're such a good giver.
Well, I really liked the book. That's one of the reasons why I actually asked for that one. Did you ask for yours, or was it?
This was my second choice.
Okay.
First choice was, I don't remember, to be honest. There were so many good choices this year. This year was pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
And this one I had heard from on different review sites before,
Mm-hmm.
recommended to me on Goodreads, that sort of thing. And so I just read a little blurb about it, and it was a very good fit for me, so I'm glad it was recommended.
Yeah.
Shall we discuss the book?
Yes. Very much literary fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to give an overview?
Sure. I love short stories because as many books as I read, it's good to be able to put them down at intervals.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of surprised at the first story when it was so long. I had to put it down in the book, but it turned out to be okay. This collection of, I think, 9 or less, there weren't very many in this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stories. Each of them had a centralized theme of desire. Each of the characters, whether the main characters or the sub-characters, wanted something. Generally, it was relationship in nature,
Right.
but not always. And it kept mentioning things like feminism and circling around that, but I felt like each of the stories was talking about how to deal with desire and different cultural aspects of it. And the whole thing read as an homage to Desire and Despair, the Sandman characters, the Endless.
Oh, yeah. I can totally see that.
It really read to me because they're the closest of the siblings.
Yeah.
You can't have one necessarily without the other. And all of the characters were a perfect illustration of that, where they wanted something and it can make you miserable.
Yeah. Yeah, because I actually, like, when you said, like, it had an overall arching theme of desire, I was like, oh, yeah. But I always saw it more as an overarching theme of loss.
Okay. The same, really?
Yeah, but definitely two sides of the same coin. I felt like the loss in the stories was a lot more pronounced than the desire. The desire I actually thought was very kind of clinical.
Oh, okay.
Like the writing was beautiful, and I loved the way it was written, but I thought that the relationships were actually stronger than the love relationships, and
Yes.
the losses were really highlighted.
I agree with that statement completely. The friendship relationships were so strong because there wasn't a desire there.
Yeah.
It was just, this is what you have, and therefore it's okay. You don't have to worry about it. One of my favorite metaphors in this was have you ever had sat down at a dinner table and realized that everything you wanted was at that table? And you think that sort of metaphor would be warm and comforting, and the very next sentence tears it apart and says, it's very unsettling. It's having everything in a little boat with nothing outside of that boat to anchor it.
Right.
And I love that idea, because I think we've all had that at some point in our lives where we wanted something so desperately and so badly, and then when we've gotten it, knowing that we have it and need it so much, it's fleeting.
Yeah.
There have been time periods in my life that even in the moment of living it, I've been able to say, and this will pass, and I will feel lost.
Yeah, I actually do that quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. And it's horrifying, but you have nothing you can do about it. It's a matter of the desire is here now, enjoy it while we've got it, loss.
Right.
And then here comes despair.
Right. But yeah, I felt like that. There was one story in there, Slatland.
Yes.
That, so, okay, just to let you know, we will be talking about the book. Yeah, if you have not read the book, we will be talking about things that you don't know about. Which, if you're fine with that, is cool.
They have done studies that say that knowing what happens in the book does not in any way, and in some ways, heightens the experience of the book. So maybe this is what you want to do.
Yeah, I am not. I usually don't mind spoilers, so it doesn't bother me. But if it bothers you, don't listen. So that said, in Slatland, one of the characters, anytime she would be in a situation where she was upset, her therapist had taught her to rise above the situation and kind of look down on it in her head, and they called it Slatland. She was going to Slatland. And I felt like the whole book was kind of written like that. Like it was,
detached.
Yeah, a little bit detached. And like I said, it was really interesting because the language was so, pretty.
I felt like that detachment was a result of the characters she was describing. Most of these stories, all of them in some way were connected to a campus of higher learning.
Right. It felt very academic.
Uh-huh. And I feel like that was very intentional to say that these characters are going to be unusually heightened in their it to dissect what is happening to them emotionally, and asking us to do the same thing, which I adore, because it allowed the entire book to become more than an emotional journey and more of an exploration of the subject matter.
Right. Yeah, and each story was very much, I felt like they were like little paintings.
Yeah, vignettes.
Yeah.
Very Salinger.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because, they were sort of moments in time. They didn't have, some of them sort of began concretely, but they didn't really end concretely.
Mm-hmm.
It was just sort of like this little moment, and you got a glimpse into these people's lives, and it was kind of almost like you were looking and just watching this little scene from above. So it was neat.
I thought it was beautiful. The most interesting part about this book for me, aside from the obvious ability to dissect this one emotion, was, you mentioned it, it's beautifully written.
Mm-hmm.
It took me forever to read this book. I mean, considering how short it is. It's only like 200 pages. Skinny little book.
Yeah.
But this skinny little book, 50 pages would take me 3 hours to get through.
Right.
Because I'd find myself reading a paragraph and going, oh my God, that's gorgeous, and rereading and rereading and rereading. And I kept trying to tweet it for Pages Podcast, but there was no individual sentence that I could take apart. There were no 140 characters. The entire paragraph would come together in such a shockingly, startlingly revealing way that any little bit of it, my favorite part about that was it always started out trite. Like the first sentence was something like, "The words flew away like birds," and you're going, I've read that.
Right.
And then the very next sentence was, and this one was in there, shocked to life by the feeling of the blood in their veins.
Yeah.
And then you just sit there going, oh, okay, now that it's not trite anymore. It's beautiful.
Right. Yeah, and I actually really liked the intermixing of, that kind of stuff, like a little bit of trite stuff, a little bit of silly stuff, mixed in with this, like, beautiful, much more serious language. And then occasionally, like, these sort of odd pop culture references. Is it true that Wonder Woman can love people unconditionally? Is that really Wonder Woman powers? I really think that is.
Keep in mind what Wonder Woman was meant to do. She's, again, one of the central themes, feminism. She was one of the early attempts in a very masculine-dominated field to have a woman that had some strength. And at that time, a woman's strongest attribute.
Yeah.
They're so loving. They never met me.
So yeah, like, there was just a lot of, like, dichotomy, and I love the interplay between...
I'm sorry, folks. Kat just tried to leave her litter box and tore off the privacy curtain. Way to go, Gwen here.
Just one of her favorite things to do, actually.
You're gonna have fun with that.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna have Dax, like, somehow fix that permanently, because Basil was very good with it. She just is like, tear it down.
I don't need no stick of privacy. You will watch me poop. Poor Gwen. And there she was, just sitting in the middle, like, what? That's how I roll.
So there was a lot of, like, dichotomy of, like, kind of privilege and, sort of modern American living. Not even, there was some wealth in there, but also just sort of, regular middle class American living, and, some, not commentary, not so much directly, but, conversations between characters about how, we can sit around and be depressed and sad and need therapy, but, we really don't have, it's first world problems.
Yes. Yes. But their desires nonetheless.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And some, debate on whether that's valid or not. Mm-hmm. So there was one story where the characters were definitely just discussing that. But then there was another story where, a woman travels with a friend over to Hong Kong, and his father is, politically involved in...
He's an ambassador, essentially.
Yeah, and there's the Vietnamese immigration, and they want to kick the Vietnamese out, and he is involved in...
as a man of privilege, of wealth, in Hong Kong at the time, has an awful lot of say over what will happen to these poor immigrants that are fleeing.
Yeah, so there's this storyline of, she's there visiting her wealthy friend, like her father paid for her to come visit, and he's given her the job of finding his son a wife. So she's there in this beautiful office, like, trying to find a wife, and then there's these immigrants who are protesting and living in bad conditions and are about to get, kind of thrown out of the country. And there's just a lot of that back and forth. And then it's not, like, hit you over the head with it. It's very much just sort of observational. Mm-hmm. Like, there's this story, and then there's this story.
Any desire that they mentioned, they circled back around from a different point of view later. Like, that exact issue they talked about later, kind of from the opposite perspective, with the story of the, not Russian, It's Eastern European.
Yeah, that's the one where they were discussing it.
Flatland.
Yeah.
She's learning to rise above it, and she talks about her lover of 2 years, and he's kind of mysterious. It looks like he's just an immigrant. She finds out that he actually has a wife and kids that he's been trying to pull over and he can't. And her desire of wanting to be with him is torn between that and the woman's desire because she's got kids and she's stuck.
And she's living in Romania and they don't have food.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like his whole family is there. And she knows that he's corresponding with his family, but, you know, in this case, he says he's corresponding with his sister, and is trying to get his sister,
but you don't view him as horrible. You see all this from all different angles. You see it from the poor woman stuck in Romania. You see it from this poor man that just 2 years he's been here. He fell in love with another woman. Can you really blame him? You know,
right.
He's got to live while he's here. But at the same time, part of his heart's back there. There's nothing he can do about that. So you've got the poverty issue from that angle as well, and from the woman who's in love with him and how hard it is on her, juxtaposed with the other poverty issue. There's another story where there's a child who's not fitting in at the table, and it's got a desire of fitting in. And then at the second to last story, you've got a group of essentially interns for architecture for a famous architect. And there are two characters that are a little bit removed that love this feeling of fitting in, and it's obviously everything to them. So you get to see that fitting in from people who are in and need it so badly, and from the perspective of this boy who doesn't really need it.
Right, but his mother wants it for him.
I love that. The feminism thing, we get to see that from 7 different angles.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah, and again, it's like this theme, but it's observational. They're not, like, they're really, that's one of the things I really like about the book. There's a lot of serious, you know, thoughts and you know, provoking ideas in it, but they're not hitting you over the head with any of it. They're kind of sort of showing you both sides and not really being judgy in any way.
They could have very easily villainized any number of these characters in there, and you don't love all of them.
No.
A lot of them you're just, I wouldn't want to eat dinner with you, but I don't hate you either.
Right.
It's just, you're kind of not pleasant.
Yeah.
But I feel for you, man.
Yeah, it's kind of a very pretty study of gray area.
Ooh, that is a nice way of saying it. Yes.
And I like gray area. So
absolutely. I can delve to that thing for weeks. Mm-hmm. Gray area just through and through. That's why I can't write, actually, is I have my paintings, I have problems getting through. There's so much, I always come to the end where you're supposed to have a conclusion, and I'm like, I don't know! The whole thing's a mess! It used to frustrate my art teachers to no end, and it frustrates me when I try and write, and I get to the end, and my one solace in that is that all Jewish writers do that. All of them. If you have ever read any great Jewish author, all of them get to the end, they're like, life's a mess. I'm just going to be the next Jewish author. It's fine.
Okay, there was one story in here that I am not sure. Let's see, what was it? Is it the Banks Fistula? It's the one where she plagiarizes the paper.
Oh, that's the, Banks of Vistula.
Okay. So, like, this one was kind of fascinating to me because the student plagiarizes a paper, and she
because she desires to please the teacher.
Yeah, and she plagiarizes it because she loves the language, and she plagiarizes it without quite understanding what it's saying. Mm-hmm. And so she submits it, and the professor calls her, and he knows she's plagiarized it, he kind of knows the situation, but, he's trying to draw it out of her. And it turns out that she's basically plagiarized Soviet propaganda. And her professor is Polish and had to kind of submit to Russian rule and go against his own beliefs.
And join the Russian army as opposed to the Polish-Russian army when Russia took over that segment of Poland.
And he kind of tells her this, and she stands by the paper, and it's sort of this long, drawn-out story. So she stands by the paper, she insists that she wrote it, he kind of flips and is sort of being fatherly toward her, which I thought was genuine. But then chooses her to speak at this very prestigious symposium. She was a keynote speaker at this symposium and present her paper,
which she didn't write, and comes to discover she doesn't believe anything it says.
Right. So as she goes back to look at it, she sort of just procrastinates and tries to ignore the situation, and she doesn't agree to it, but he basically just puts her on the program. And so she ends up presenting this communist manifesto to her family and friends.
We're all wilting, listen to this, going, "Oh my God, I didn't even know that you go to college for Nikes."
Yeah. So, and the professor sort of seems to be trying to teach her a lesson, but there's also he seems to be trying to make a point philosophically, and I wasn't sure if I got all of it.
I almost felt like, and I could be very wrong, because the end of this one, again, was a lot of gray area. There is a boyfriend character in this one to the girl that plagiarizes the paper that hates the professor and says he betrayed his country, points out evidence that he was put on tribunal and convicted. He was actually living in the U.S. because Poland would kill him for killing his fellow countrymen and
right.
being a turncoat. And I think part of me sees... I'm not entirely sure that the professor was genuine. I think he was scared of the ideas when first presented. And then, as the course of this comes about, I think there's a part of him that believes it. That when it's being presented, it's like he doesn't have to have the danger of presenting the material, but it can still get out there and have life.
Yeah, okay. So there was that. I wasn't sure if that was...
She was complicit, and I think the feminist message in this one was, if you don't find your own voice, you'll speak with somebody else's, and you won't necessarily like what you're saying.
Right.
So she was giving voice to both the dead author and this turncoat's
right.
Horribly oppressive ideas that were very hurtful, killed people. And I think that was the author's saying, these are the dangers of not speaking up
right.
for yourself.
Yeah, and I couldn't tell whether the professor just felt, because there's some discussion between him and the boyfriend, because the boyfriend sees him as a traitor. And the professor kind of defends himself by saying, well, this was the only way I could survive. Even though Russia instigated this problem, they also ended up being the solution to the problem, because by, joining
Russia's
them...
always the one that hits you, but they're the ones that save you.
Right. Mm-hmm. So, it was a matter of life and death and survival, and doing what he did saved his life, but he obviously felt guilty about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seemed like her presenting this paper and these ideals kind of made him feel justified, I guess.
Yes.
And
yes, he was trying to.
And also put her in
guilt.
not a life or death situation, but she was doing something she knew was wrong, just to, save face.
They did very much leave that gray area in this one, where it isn't necessarily the only evidence that she comes up with for him telling the truth is when her roommate is wearing his coat. She pulls out a hat and puts it on, and the girl that plagiarized, oh, look, it's the Russian hat. He must be telling the truth.
Right.
And yes, it was in the story, but that's a very thin little thing that really could have happened without it doesn't mean he's telling the truth. And that little grasping for some
justification.
It struck me very much as, again, anyone who's been in a situation where a lover's lying to you, or if somebody's lying to you, you don't want it to be, you grasp for any hope that, no, look, it's fine. And you're doing something wrong. And that struck me as her grasping for that grain of truth. No, it's fine. We're fine. La, la, la.
Yeah. Yeah, they just kept going through the whole thing, like, just say you didn't write the paper.
And then she does, and he's like, no.
Too late.
Exactly. Oops.
How can you go present a keynote on a plagiarized paper?
She did.
And people do.
Yeah. This is true. I was never smart enough to plagiarize.
No.
It would have gotten me a good boost in grades, I'm sure. Kidding. I'm not. I don't. One of my favorites was one that you actually, I believe, didn't like, was the very first one, Bobcat, which, of course, is on the title. It's a group of women, and one of the women's, two of the women's husbands. And you get introduced as the one couple is preparing this company meal. And it's done very much in the upper middle class traditional way that you would see in the 1950s. She's making all these fancy dishes that should take days to make, but like we all do in those situations, she's making the quick version. And they get into a little lover spat over his book. Just real quick synopsis. You get to watch from that point to the end of the dinner. Well, yeah, basically the end of the dinner party. And like so many of these other stories, then she cuts and goes, and from looking back on that from the future. So you get this whole perspective over what was going on there. And of course, hindsight is 20/20. She gets to look back and say, my marriage fell apart. And you can see all the little things that she did that she saw another woman doing. She was doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's beautifully insightful because you get to see different female perspectives, all looking at the same situations and dealing with essentially long-term relationships. How do you deal with marriage and children?
Right.
And the incredibly vulnerable stage of pregnancy and soon after.
Yeah. And I guess I just didn't, because I said, well, I didn't like the people very much, and I think that's true. But I just, like, it just wasn't as interesting to me. Like, all the other stories had, like, people from other countries and other cultures and sort of things I'm not as familiar with mixed in. And that one was just a dinner party. And you're right, and it was very insightful. It just didn't feel as unique to me, I guess.
I think that one felt closest to J.D. Salinger out of all of them to me, where that's what part of the thing that drew me to it was that there wasn't anything grand or specific about it. It was very banal.
Yeah.
Yet in this very tiny moment of only 2 hours, you watch 2 relationships and 2 lives unravel.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess I just didn't care.
That's fair. I could understand that. I to the one J.D. Salinger story where you watch a very drunk woman who's had a friend come over. I don't remember what it's called, but she gets drunker and drunker all night, and you discover she misses a lost love. And it's just one evening in the woman's life, 2 hours. She ends up drunkenly going to sleep. And just her blitherings are so painful that it's all first world problems.
Right.
Like, you want to tell her, like, the same way you want to tell the women in this book. It's no big deal. You'll be fine. But you know those feelings. And, oh my God, they're so real at the moment.
Yeah.
First world or non-desire is a horrible thing to be reckoned with. And actually, in the end of that story, it was one of my favorite parts, was at the very end, where the one woman that just seems to have it all together, not like Little Miss Perfect, but kind of in the animal instinct, the one that was attacked by a bobcat, at the end, she's the only one that has complete perspective over the whole thing and just lightly touches the woman and looks at her and just as if to say, it's going to be fine. This is going to hurt, but you'll get through it.
Right.
And at that point, at that moment, how many times in your life have you been able to look at either somebody else or even your own life at some pivotal moment and just gone, this is going to suck for a little bit. Mm-hmm. Grit your teeth and go.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I mean. It was just like everything else was sort of out of my own experience, and that one was just yeah, it sucks, but okay, whatever. Like I said, I didn't really care enough about the people.
Okay,
so there was just sort of nothing there. It's like, okay. There were other things. There were things in the stories, all the other stories that were sort of outside of the people and interesting, and it didn't really matter whether I liked the characters or not. There was all this other stuff, and in that one, it was so much about those people.
It was very much. I guess that one fascinated me so much, and whereas it wouldn't necessarily for a lot of people, because the larger than what is happening in the story issue that I felt they were dealing with was feminism and the female role, especially in the nucleus of family.
Right.
And as we know, that's something that I have studied since college and really delve into. So for me, that is the crux of feminism.
Right.
Changing roles. What are your roles? To what extent are you obligated to do certain things, like staying with somebody to keep a family together?
Right.
I love that stuff.
Yeah, and I guess maybe it's because those are all just things that I've decided to never deal with. I don't know. I mean, it's. I don't know.
Yeah. No, well, shoot. I've decided to cut all of them outside of my life because I don't like the results of what I've studied.
Yeah.
Like, those roles are so messy and so changing.
And I guess that I was so angsty about all of that when I was younger that I just don't. I care in the sense that, yes, it's still important, and yes, there's still a lot of stuff that happens that it's important that people care about it, but
that's not your area of focus.
No.
It's just not. Worst, it is my area of focus.
Yeah.
Hence why this is my book.
I feel like I covered all that a long time ago, and
I would love to be able to look past it. I really would. I mean, seriously, it sucks in the muck and the gunk with this.
I'm actually in the and I could never find this quote, so I don't even know if this is true or not. But
I love those.
In one of my it was, I think, my figure drawing class in college, or some sort of art class. We talked about Georgia O'Keeffe, and Georgia O'Keeffe made some comment about. Like somebody asked her about being a female painter, and she was just like, it has never mattered because I know what I can do, and nobody has ever been able to treat me any less because I'm a good painter. You know what I mean? Like I said, I could never find that quote, so I don't know if that's true or not, but I kind of, that is, like, I don't want to dwell on all that anymore.
I can understand that.
I know that it's
from the family relationship that I came from. I've been able to observe roles as they're changing. I feel we live in an amazing time. When you and I were kids, I know you went through the same thing where within 2 years, it went from I only had one friend of divorced parents to like 20% of my friends were of divorce. Within 1 year, it was just all of a sudden allowed. It was socially acceptable. There was like a bottleneck of divorces waiting to happen. And there were so many changes leading up to that. I feel like that was a good midway point for establishing what the new family would look like. And we're still not there. But the examination of at what point, what obligations, and there was a lot of that in this. There was infidelity in almost every story. I can only think of one that infidelity wasn't an issue. And there were children in quite a few of the stories as well. Plenty of divorces, women's roles. So this was exploring that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that for myself, like I said, I've kind of chosen, because I've chosen the path, I don't want kids, and, I'm married, but I don't think we have a very, not traditional in the open marriage sense, but just I feel very independent, and my husband is very independent, and like I don't feel like those issues are there so much. And
you fell very neatly into a modern relationship,
right? So
without too much mess in between.
Yeah. So because I am not personally struggling with this myself right now, don't care. It's basically what I'm saying. And also, I think because I live where I live and I don't see it all the time, and
that is true.
Like it could be when I end up moving to a smaller place and
further
it's
south
in my face more, I might care a lot more about it because I'm being confronted with it. But
although I see the subtlety of it in the upper middle class urban areas as well, and they do address that, where it's not just an issue of the Southerners or an issue of people in their 50s. It is an issue of the up and coming, of the wealthy, of the poor, and I like that. So are we going to talk about how the book ends, that very last book? The last story was Settlers.
Okay, let me get, because I just read it.
She's not kidding.
Very, very quickly.
At the very, very end of the very last book, last story, she goes into a pretty dark place, which, as we know, I kind of adore dark places. And this woman is carrying around a child who is like a long stillbirth. The child is alive, but barely. Heart is registering once every minute or so. And it will be a stillbirth, but she's still waiting for the child to pass. And
which that would be horrible.
Horrifying.
That would be horrible.
But so she's going through the latter part of this story about this child, and she's with a man. She's always wanted children. She's with a man that isn't necessarily her life's desire, but this is the man that could provide what she needed. The other things she desired. And she's talking to this, she's not out loud, but to herself, talking to this child and saying, yes, there are wonderful things in this world. It's a good clincher for the whole book. There are Ferris wheels and love and all these grand things like walking on the beach. But there are also the men that you don't end up with that you want to, and all these other desires you have. And basically tells her child, it's okay to die. It's very hard out here anyway, and is trying to comfort the child by saying, it sucks. Yay, happy note.
Yeah. Which I don't necessarily agree with. And I feel like that ties up the book because I think the book as a whole is really dark.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I felt like it was more about loss than anything. But for me, it was the writing style. Sorry, we keep getting this screensaver, which I know you can't see, but you keep seeing me going.
Okay, going. Fix it.
Like that statement is contradicted by the writing,
which I love because just before saying that, it is very apparent that she doesn't want this child to die. She loves it very much. She wants it. For me, what she's saying when she says it's okay to die is an acceptance and letting go of her desires.
Yeah, I can see that.
In one of these stories, it actually, one of the gentleman from Hong Kong was saying that in his culture, the reason for arranged marriages, not fully arranged, but, you trust somebody else to set you up, is that you're not trying to gain and fulfill desire. You're trying to sate it. Just quelch whatever desire you have, and that's how you live a happy life, is by not being desirous, not by chasing your desires. And I feel like she's coming to terms with that in the very last story, where she's saying, it's okay. I want this, but this is better for you. It's okay.
Right. Yeah, which is good. I still don't necessarily agree.
With what part specifically?
Well, just the key to a happy life is the giving up of desire. I think that might be true in instances, but I don't think that's true of life as a whole. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know there's the very, very, pursuit of Zen, where you just sort of detach yourself from all things. But I think part of the fun of life is the chasing of desire.
Yes. You can't, unless you're an amazing monk, you really can't get rid of it. So I don't think it's a matter of that. I think the exploration and the idea of giving up on the desires is very interesting and worth the case study that it was given.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's like I said, I think sometimes you have to give up on a desire, but and I'm also talking like desires, not necessarily like pleasures specifically, but goals and.
Well, that's how you improve. You don't get anywhere unless you want.
Right. All of that is desire. I mean, arguably kind of first world desire in a lot of cases. We're past, most of us are past having to worry about where our food is coming from. Mm-hmm. I think if you didn't have that.
Although, arguably, if you don't have the desires, you pursue for the sake of pursuit. Like, I want to be a better artist. The desire to, like that burning need that makes me hate my Facebook feed right now. Because seriously, I've just made friends with a ton of, oh my God, they're adorable. Really fantastic artists that blow my mind. So my Facebook feed is like, I sketched this evening, and it's like a Beatrix Potter guinea pig. Like, you did that in an hour because the pig was sitting in your lap. Great. It would have taken me 12 weeks, and it wouldn't have looked like that. So having that, jealousy, that desire, isn't necessary to being a better artist. I can pursue it without that overwhelming desire. I can pursue it by practicing daily.
I think those are two different separate things.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well,
one of them's desire, and I could give that up and still have the second and get better.
No, I think the one is a desire, the other is jealousy.
Touche.
Because that's what I mean. Like, you desire, you have talent, it's here, you desire it to be a peer. If you didn't desire it, there would be no passion to do it. You know? If there wasn't desire, there would be no love. I mean, there would be no loss either, but there would be no... I mean, we don't have to desire things.
I could start arguing Zen philosophy, but I've already realized that I've started speaking out of the plagiarism form, where that last thing I said, I didn't necessarily believe I was playing with the idea. And I could argue this point, and I could start pulling out some of my yoga BS.
Well, and that's what I mean. Like, I know there's an argument for Zen, and it's just the mindfulness and
the opinions coming out of Kate's mouth at this point do not necessarily reflect her actual opinions. She is just arguing with Blue. This is our favorite pastime.
But I think that life is sort of about achieving a balance between those things, and where those sort of mindful Zen things come in is the self-judgment and the jealousy, and mediating the desire into something healthy and workable,
They discuss that in the book, too, actually. Twice they mention, one, the grandmother's description of the superior woman, which is 2/3 contentment,
yes,
1/3 desire.
I was trying to remember that exactly.
I love that one. Yeah. I'm so totally going to pull that out. And then the second one is same story. The wealthy father is when he's crying about the Vietnamese. Oh, I'm losing it. He's only a man with.
Only a man who is unhappy or
with his privilege.
Hates his privilege
can handle it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, that's one, and I really love that.
Yeah.
Only a man who hates his privilege can handle it.
Right.
And actually, as I was putting that together, I thought of another one. I guess it's peppered throughout the book. The little vignettes of trying to find a balance in what we're talking about. Can't think of the other one right now, but it was there.
Yeah, because I think that's really what, there are people who are one extreme or the other, and I think if you're at the extreme of desire, you're probably going to be an unhappy person, and maybe if you're at the extreme of contentment, you could still be a happy person, but I think there's a nice happy medium there.
Mm-hmm. 2/3, 1/3.
Yeah, and I like that because I feel like that's very, very
the
true.
other one was, I actually liked it so much, I Siri'd it. I made notes in my little Siri.
Yeah,
it came out like dragon or something.
Of highlights
that's not right.
That I'm not sure how to get back to now.
The one that was that I Siri'd was the architect student who had written. It was talking about his rather humble skyscraper, and it was a good architect is, as he's building, very humble because he's scared of the heights and the danger of it, but also understands that architecture doesn't exist without the art, the beauty that makes it architecture.
Yeah.
So it's a delicate balance between being humble and being very aggressive with and ostentatious.
Yeah. Yeah, there was one that was similar. This was actually from the very first one. And I did tweet this, that she basically knew how to live a happy life, and it was revealed in the trifle. She put in what she loved, and she left out what she didn't.
Yep, I liked that one. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a typical trifle of like strawberries and stuff. It was like cinnamon and cardamom and
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked that a lot.
Yeah, that one was beautiful.
So, my hair is like doing weird things now. The benefit of being able to see yourself in the video. So good book.
Liked it. I'm really kind of surprised. It was really 2 thumbs up. I'm kind of surprised because this one was a little darker than I had anticipated. But that's not to say it wasn't full of life.
Yeah.
It was just bleeding with so much emotion.
Mm-hmm.
I was really happy with it, and I will easily reread this a couple of times. I get the library books because I read so much. Oh, this was a treat. Sorry. Total aside, it's not about the book at all. I got a correction paper in mine. There's an incomplete line at the end of the first full paragraph on page 5. This sentence should read as follows. Blah, 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 blah. The publisher regrets this error. And I go back to page 5 because this was tucked somewhere in page like 180 or something. And I had actually read it. It's a girl from TV. And then the narrator's true love was who is Zeta? And I read that and it was like, ooh, she cut herself off. That's who is Zeta? I was reading so much drama in there, but really it was a sexy Burmarian Iranian waif named Zeta.
And I wonder, since I read the Kindle version, I wonder if they just corrected it.
I think
because they do that. I know a lot of people don't like that about Kindle books, that they just can change it post-publishing.
Oh.
But I bet they just changed it.
This would have been a good time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was very excited about that. My library books hold so many treasures. I had another one that I was reading earlier this month that every 10 pages there was another library slip in there. There was an old envelope somebody had written an address on. There was a library slip from 10 years ago in there. So of course I put mine in there too.
Yeah, that's cool.
It was fantastic.
That is the benefit of library books. I'm usually Kindle or audio, or I do get books from the library, but it usually depends on whether I can get them in the time frame.
Yeah,
that I need them.
Yeah, I've got 4 on hold right now.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting to come in.
I have 2. I have one of the vaginal fantasy books, Urban Paranormal Romance Book Club by Felicia.
Not for the faint of heart.
Although if you follow along with us, you probably, or the Twitter feed at all, I post vaginal fantasy stuff on there. I just retweeted something that was the publisher made a tweet about it. It had a what's the internet meme? Animal.
There are a lot of those.
Hedgehog.
Hedgehogs, penguins, frogs, cats, pigs with monkeys on them. Which one would you like, Flo?
It was hilarious. I hate it when
Cthulhu?
A Cthulhu shifter would be interesting. Actually, we did read Cthulhu erotica for
yeah, there's a name for that.
That was interesting.
It's tentacle porn.
Yeah, it was.
I don't remember the exact. Oh god, there's a Japanese word for it because there is actually an entire category for this. Hentai, isn't that right?
Yes,
hentai. I should not know that.
Oh, of course we should. Not because I read.
Just because it's an internet thing.
Not that there's anything wrong with hentai.
I just don't personally like kissing of any form. If you kiss your family, it's got to be really light on the cheek, and then just ignore each other for the rest of the day.
Okay, when I actually need to do something, I can never figure out what I'm doing. It's I do know how to use Twitter. Where was it? It was so funny. Honey Badger! That's what I was trying to think.
Oh, Honey Badger don't care. Honey Badger don't give a shit.
The heroine of this book is a Honey Badger shifter.
She got it, folks! She got it!
I'm queer. I thought that was hilarious. I don't know what the title of the book is. Or actually, yes, I do. It's called Bite Me, which is also very funny. There must be a tiger shifter
I'm
there
branding
as
a
well.
play with that name, actually.
There's a very sexy man who is half tiger on the front of the book.
God. Wow.
So funny.
I don't belong to that book club, just so you all know. That one is not mine.
And quite honestly, I only like maybe a quarter of what we read.
But she plows through them.
I plow through
determination.
it. I have to put my Audible book, which for the last book that we read, I just did. I had to put it on 1.5 speed. I couldn't quite go up to 2 because it made them sound
Get me
like
through this.
It made them sound like chipmunks, but
And then he put his tentacles.
oh, it was like torture.
You poor thing.
And I have a book club here, so I feel like I have to read it. Like, I would have just let that one go. I have a hard time letting go of books once I've started them, but I would have. It was 12 hours of ridiculous.
Ooh.
So I was also trying to remember what our next book is. I know what it's about, but I can't
Next
remember.
book is
Blood
Liz'
Will
choice.
Out.
Oh,
Yes, this one's my choice, although I couldn't decide between a few books, and so I did run them by Kate.
Cheated.
Yeah, I guess that's cheating. But,
This is
whoops, sorry. It's Blood Will Out, a true story of murder, a mystery, and a masquerade. So, true crime story. I really like true crime. Apparently, Kate really likes true crime as well. In Cold Blood haunts me to this day. I will never leave a door unlocked, ever, 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 because of that book. And I loved it. That might sound like I didn't like the book, but I loved that book. So they compare this to in Cold Blood. I highly doubt it's that good. I did read some of the Audible reviews, and they were mixed. But it sounded like the people who were critical were already really familiar with the story, and they're like, they're just rehashing the story. I know nothing about this story. So it is apparently the author. It's written by an author who was, I think, going through a creative block or a hard period of writing. And gets roped into, he delivers something to one of the Rockefellers and ends up getting drawn into this crazy like scheme, and there's a murder in there somewhere, and apparently this was big news at some point, but I'm guessing a while ago, and before I was paying any attention to anything. So
Some of it, when I was reading the synopsis, it's synopsis sounded very familiar, but I never went into any depth of it. If it was highly publicized, that's probably why I didn't know.
Yeah, and I don't know
avoid it like the plague unless it was like politically motivated.
yeah,
If it was just gore, I would just ignore it because
and
that's rude.
I don't know when the story happened, but I'm guessing it was long enough ago that I was probably too young to be paying much attention.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, it looks
Sounds
good.
good.
I'm excited. I have downloaded the audio already, and we'll read it as soon as I'm done listening to Veronica Mars, which I am so excited about. That came out yesterday. I watched the movie I came home last night, and we have this new television that is a smart TV, and it kept dropping the internet signal. So I sat there reconnecting the internet last night so I could watch the damn Veronica Mars movie so I could start this book this morning.
Oh, that would kill me. See, I'm a little bit sad. I'm a little disgruntled about the Veronica Mars thing just because it's one of those things I can't... There are very few things I can't nerd out about that everybody else nerds out about. Mm-hmm. That's one of them. I was never a big TV watcher at all, ever. And I really never, even as a teenager, did not care about teenagers. I mean, I'll give you all the same speech I always gave Blue. The reason I didn't get into Veronica Mars is because she's a teenager that solves crimes, right? The problem is, as a teenager, our brain, which has got all these great like connections formed and we're really good at problem solving, our brain melts at that time period to form a brand new brain that we have as adults, which means we literally get stupider. Oops. It's not our fault. It just happens, which would mean that she is a smarter than adult human being at the exact time that all of her little connections collapsed and started reforming. It's not a good time for long-term thinking and strategizing and problem solving. And
she's good at the private detective stuff. She is not so good at the normal stuff.
Okay,
so,
that's
but
a
I still feel like
believable.
I'm 16. You guys still have 16-year-old Blaine?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, yeah, you.
So,
I'm not saying there aren't brilliant 16-year-olds out there. Obviously there are.
I don't feel like a brilliant.
I just know that my experience at 16, not right. So it's hard to relate for me. So I couldn't get into it.
It's not hard to relate for me.
You're like, I was solving crimes at that age.
No, not that. I don't mind the teenageriness of it.
Yeah.
And it also, it's in, like, stuff set in wealthy schools. I went to, because I went to high school in Lake Geneva, so I kind of went to that school. So I don't know. I wasn't wealthy, but I was around a lot of people who are wealthy, and so I always kind of identify. But yeah, huge Veronica Mars fan.
I'm just disgruntled because I can't hear about it.
Well, I've not watched Doctor Who. I only watched a little bit of Buffy, so I'm usually that person who can't nerd out about stuff. I nerd out about very specific things, like Lost, Veronica Mars, Gilmore Girls. That's another one that I'm a big fan of.
It's okay.
So very
we've awarded you your geek card.
But the audiobook is so good so far. Kristen Bell narrates it, so it's just like sort of a continuation. It was beautiful. I rewatched the show, then like I rewatched the movie. It was pretty seamless, and then the book like starts out right where the movie ends. I really like this whole cross media thing.
Nice.
So
well done.
Very excited.
Well done.
And
so we'll get that one next. What have you been reading since last we met a month ago?
Oh, nothing that exciting. The horrible vaginal fantasy book, which was, I can tell you, so you can, not you, you'll avoid it no matter what, but anybody who happens to listen, avoid The Darkest Kiss.
Not a winner, folks.
No.
This is not the tentacle porn you seek.
I did I'm a little bit of book club addict. I started reading along with this, it's Cozy Book Cafe, Cozy Corner Cafe, something cafe on Goodreads. I don't even know what I'm reading along. It's a book called Someone Else's Love Story. That was pretty good. Like it wasn't fabulous, but it was good. It was interesting. It was well written. And then Weird Sisters. I was re-listening to that one's that's neat. It's three sisters who are named after the Weird Sisters in Shakespeare. So it's kind of this. The father is a Shakespeare professor. And the mother was very artsy, so it's kind of just this. It's about the family, but
we had actually gone to a talk with the author, and it seemed fascinating to me. I actually do want to read that one at some point. My list is just so long.
Yeah.
It seemed very much about familial ties.
Yeah, it's very much about the ties between these three sisters and their family. But it's like interwoven with Shakespeare quotes, and it's very it's not quite like highbrow literary, but it's pretty literary, and I like it.
It seemed
quite a bit.
The woman, when she was speaking, was very down to earth, so I couldn't see this one being written in a way that wasn't as familiar, able to read through it, novel sort of thing. But she was, she could make all of the Shakespeare accessible.
Yeah.
Which I really appreciated.
So, and what about you? What are you reading?
Well, in honor of the many, we've got Free Comic Book Day coming up. There was, read a comic day or something.
Oh, read a graphic novel week was this month.
There we go.
I started reading Sandman along with this Sandman book club.
Because she needs another book club.
Yeah,
I love the Sandman series.
Oh, it's
just
so good,
beautiful.
And I actually realized that I didn't. Because it's my ex-boyfriend who gave me single comics when I first started reading it. So I never read it from the beginning. Like he started it.
I did all of them.
He started me at the prettier parts.
Okay.
There was that whole beginning, like, dark and gory part. He apparently edited that out for me.
That doesn't surprise me.
No, it doesn't
at all.
surprise me.
Like, we just
but I liked it. I liked it. I was like, wow, I never read this.
It is a fantastic gateway graphic novel. Like, I read comics as a kid because I read everything as a kid. But I stopped reading comics because they were, foof. Until very early in college, when Sandman was introduced to me, Mouse, just some of the really heavy ones that are either literary or cover some very dark topics.
Yeah.
And it just hooked me back in. So I read Mouse again this last month.
Yeah, I want to read that.
Oh, fantastic. I've got 1 and 2, if you are missing either of those. I reread them every year or so. It's just, the author-illustrator is one of my inspirations. And we actually got to see Spiegelman talk very recently. Life dream fulfilled.
Yeah.
I based a lot of my works on Spiegelman early on in my career. But at any rate, he speaks so beautifully about such deep topics. Has excellent pacing, can bring you back from the brink, and really gave graphic novels a voice to speak about serious subject matter.
Yeah.
Almost single-handedly. And I'm not excluding that there are some other amazing artists of his time. It was just very rare at that time. So I reread that, and then reread another graphic novel after that, and I don't remember which it is. But at any rate, then I picked up Harvey Picar's Not My Parents' Israel, which is an examination of the entire history of Israel, from concept to finish in a little, well, not even that, from biblical history to present day. And Harvey Picar grew up in a very Zionistic family and came to change his beliefs about the legitimacy of Israel in his adult life. And the funny thing is that I read the book with, trying to get a good perspective from both sides, because I read a lot of pro-Israel and a lot of anti-Israel commentary, and I expected this to fall very heavily in the anti-Israel. And I could almost hear my mom talk in some of this, where Harvey Picar was very guilty about not feeling so pro-Israel. And he thought that he was speaking with this anti-Israel voice. And I go through the whole thing, and none of it struck me as anti-Israel. All of it struck me as, this is a very complex situation. And evidently nobody had explained that to him as a child. So he came up thinking it was all roses, and this is his exploration of the fact that it's complex. And it's very well done. I actually think that it was an excellent complement to Understanding Israel in 90 Days. Sarah, I forget her name, wrote and illustrated that after her birthright trip to Israel. But at any rate, Carr, we all know him, American Gods, right? No, that's Gaiman. Jeez, though. What's the one? What's the one that Carr is most famous for? They made a movie out of it. I don't remember right now. Sorry, guys. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yes.
And then after that, I am still reading, I'm close to the end, on Gardens of Kyoto, which is about a girl whose cousin that I'm starting to pick up that there's some romantic ties, very strong romantic ties in that one. I'm not sure how much is intended to be almost like that. In Japanese literature, there's a very heavy theme of the Oedipus complex, mother-son love, and I'm not entirely sure how much this is supposed to be reminiscent of that, and how much of it is just kind of a sweet young thing. I don't know, the familial thing kind of creeps me out, but
yeah.
Okay. But her cousin died in the war, actually he was the last death in the Battle of Iwo Jima. And it's her looking back on his whole life and the infidelity that resulted in him and the culture surrounding both the war and being very quiet about unusual family structures. So far it's very good. It's very dark, but I did have to put that down a little bit to get to this book.
Yeah. I was trying to find. I obviously don't know how to navigate my highlights in the Kindle. Like, I can get to the first page of them, but every time I try to go to, like, scroll through them, it just takes me to the quotes. So anyway, we went to see Edward Gorey, or not him.
His spirit came up and it was awesome.
Yeah, it was great. Went to see an Edward Gorey exhibit yesterday, and which was fabulous. It was done at the Loyola Museum. I don't know.
Luma.
Yeah, I don't know much longer it's going to be there. I don't think that much longer, but if you get a chance to go see it. It's great.
It's beautiful. Sorry, go on.
Oh, and I was going to bring up, there was not an Edward Gorey reference in Bobcat, but Edward Lear, one of his influences.
Yes.
And I was trying to find, they reference, what is it, the Jubilees?
Yes.
And I wish I could get to the quote because it was a great quote. But I was like, oh, I recognize this. I saw this yesterday.
Yes, actually, it came up several times, and I had Googled while I was reading to check out all of Edward Lear's stuff.
Yeah. So I thought that was pretty cool. But
real life and books merging. Yeah. Oh my god!
Yay! Synchronicity.
It's the Matrix.
So I guess that's it. Anything else?
No, I don't think so. We introduced next week. We said what we're reading, and we talked about a book.
Yeah. Right. So I will put up show notes. I'm sure by the time this goes live, they will be there.
American Splendor.
What?
Show notes. Sorry. Picard's book.
Yes! Okay.
At least got it. Way out.
I didn't know what that was. So you can find the show notes on pagespodcast.com. We are now everywhere. We are on Twitter. We are on
Facebook. Under your bed.
We're stalking you. We are on Goodreads. I would love for more people to join up to on the Goodreads group and talk about the books with us. Be a book club addict like me. And Pinterest and Instagram, everywhere. You can find the audio versions on iTunes and Stitcher. And if you're watching the video, I guess you can find it on YouTube. So, so that's it. We will see you next time to Do you want to say where they can find you on?
You
on
can
the
find me
internet?
on the interwebs at katecitron.com. I do an illustrated blog at blogger.yogabadassery.com. Pages Podcast, obviously. I'm on Twitter and Facebook and all the various social media outlets at Kate Citron.
Yep. And I'm Blue Caldwell just pretty much everywhere. So
Under your bed.
so we will see you next time.